friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. I have worked on this particular style of instrument dozens of times, and yet I don't think it's ever been on film, and it's about time we change that, I guess. Looky looky. We have a chili dipper. That's what I call them. A lot of people call them chili dippers, bullback mandolins, humpback mandolins. I'm trying to think, there was another common name that I used to call them too, and I can't think of it right now. It's the oh so mio mandolin. I don't know, it's just a different style. These ought to be worth, $500,000, because who would take all the time to make that? That's a lot harder to make than it looks like. I mean, you got to bend that wood in two different directions and all these angles and pieces. Oh, what a pain to make. But for me personally, this style of mandolin has really no value at all. Now, I'm not knocking the mandolin, I'm not knocking the person that sent it to me. I'm just telling you, for me personally, it has no value, and the reason is because you just don't play these mandolins in bluegrass and country, and the reason is, well, there's two or three reasons. Number one, you can't hold the darn thing. When you're standing up, it just rolls. I mean, like if you got it in your lap even, it wants to roll away from you. They're very hard to play, very hard to keep up with. That's problem number one. But the bigger problem, number two, is that they don't project. They don't have any real punch or volume out there. They got a pretty sound, I guess, if you're playing the flutter style or like tremolo style mandolin, that type of thing. But otherwise, they just don't really project very much. This one's in really good shape. It's, give you a close-up look here. There's the pick guard. Often these pick guards like this are chipped and broken and shattered. There's a crack in the top right there, not too bad. Another little minor crack right here, but it's even lesser of a problem. The fretboard itself looks pretty good. It's got a pretty good underbow though. For as short a neck as it actually has a fairly hefty underbow. It's a washburn, and I think you can probably see here on the headstock there. We'll hold that still for you for a second so you can take a look at that. That's not uncommon for these to have these kind of covers on the backs of these mandolins. I've seen it quite often. I've even seen it on other instruments too. I'm sure they've routed out a spot inside of here for all the gears and mechanics to fit down in there. Just a different way of doing it. I don't know how old this one is, but if I was guessing, I'd say very early 1900s. And in fact, the label inside here, it's got a date as old as 1894 on part of the label, but that's not when it was made. It says it's a model 1915, so probably was made around that time frame. It's got a number 2044, style 1630. So I guess the serial number is 2044 and the style is 1636. And it says model 1915. I don't know that you'll be able to read that label. Hopefully you could read that a little bit, maybe pause your video or something. But anyway, it's a pretty cool old instrument as far as the looks and all that. A major pain in the neck to play, for me personally. This was a shipped-in instrument. It's been in the shop for quite a while, and I'm just getting to it. I need to contact the customer and see how far they want to go with this. I'm assuming it's just in for a setup. I don't really see any major problems with it. There's a little tiny little bitty piece of binding, or purfling, or whatever you want to call that, right there missing. Very minimal, not a big deal. Otherwise, it's in very good shape. Here's some detail around here. See, all this is shaped to fit that, and man, that's a lot of work. Like I said, these ought to sell for $100,000. But if I had to make one, I'd want to charge that. I'm pretty sure, because they're really they're very ornate, very cool looking. But for the most part, about 90% of the people I know that own them hang them on the wall. So I don't know how this one's going to be used. This one's probably going to be played, I assume, since it's in the shop here. I don't really see any problems. Usually the neck's loose, all kinds of problems with these things. Usually these are separated. So this one's, as far as the condition goes, I'd say this one's an A+ on condition compared to most of them. Once again, friends, it's mere seconds for you, but quite a few days for me. And you can see over my shoulder there that on the screen I'm holding this mandolin, and that is because I had to watch the video to see where I left off because I didn't know. Yeah, well, I did talk to the customer, and the customer said they want it fixed. So they want to go, you know, I gave them my best estimate on the number of hours, etc., and they said go for it. So we're going to go ahead and get her fixed up. The obvious would be these cracks. We'll see if we can get them to seal up first. So here we go. I'm going to start by taking this tailpiece off. The only reason I'm taking it off is because it just happens to span this crack. I don't think it's really putting any pressure on the crack, and if I try to close the crack, but I thought no point in even taking any kind of chance on it. Not only that, it'll give me a chance to inspect behind here to make sure everything's okay behind here, even to make sure that the screw holes are not wallered out. There's that word again, wallered. Here in the southern mid-Ozarks of Missouri, that's kind of a standard word. I don't see any real problem there. This is what locks this locks it down, so you know you can lock the cover down with this by turning it, and that screw pokes through there quite a ways, as you can see, and so they've actually got a hole drilled through there for the screw to go up inside the mandolin. Yeah, I can definitely move that right there, so that's definitely a problem. I cannot squeeze it together. Even with quite a bit of pressure, it's not moving really at all. So I don't think it's a good idea to just squeeze this really, really hard and squeeze it back together. I don't think it'll hold, especially the shape and the way this is made. There's got to be a lot of outward pressure on this. Trying to get that little fine crack to hold with as much pressure as it would take is just not worth it. So our better bet is to fill the crack, whether we need to put a piece of wood in there or just fill it with glue. I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm going to inspect it up really close and see what I can learn by that. Get my little inspection magnifier here and take a look at it. That really makes it obvious that it's a huge crack, because this makes everything look huge. Now it's not touching by quite a bit all the way through there. It's pretty darn straight. I'd say there's a good chance we could get a fine sliver of wood in there, and so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try cleaning this out and see if we can get a real fine sliver of wood in there. I really think that's a better option in this case than trying to squeeze it together. The very tip of the X-Acto knife, and I run it backwards down through the hole. In other words, the blade is pointed up at this point, and I'm dragging it backwards down through the hole. That blade really does act like a good scraper. The back of it's cut off real square. This end, I'm going to leave it feather out like it's doing. I'll just feather the end of the piece that we put in here, hopefully to make it match that. But this end down here, I'm trying to square it off where it runs up against the purfling. Probably doesn't look too much different to you, although you can probably tell it's a little bit wider now. But that gives it a good surface, a good clean surface too, because that surface was glued before, and that gets in there and scrapes out that old dried up hard glue. I'll just measure the thickness of this blade, which I'm sure I've measured before, but I don't remember what it was. And it says 21 thousandths. So somewhere about 18 thousandths. You got to have a little bit of play. Something that thin, you'll never get it down in that hole. It just, you can't push it down in there. So I'm going to shoot for about 18 thousandths on a piece of wood this long and see if we can get it in that crack. That's not easy to do. One benefit of keeping all those little tiny scraps of wood is that you have plenty to choose through to find the piece you need to make something like we're about to make. Here's a real high grade piece of spruce. It's got the grain direction the right way and it's pretty small, so there'll be very little waste. The negative of keeping all those is that you have all of them laying around, if you know what I mean. We're just going to cut it off at about 5 inches roughly. This is not exact. 5 is more than I need, so as long as I cut it off at least that long, we're good. Wider like this might be easier to thin down without it breaking, so I think I'll just leave it wide like this for now. It only needs to be, the thickness of a top, which is pretty thin, but I think this will go through the thickness sander and get it to my thickness better this way. So that's what we're going to do. For those of you who are new to my videos, this is a thickness sander that I made. These stripes that are on here are from some exotic woods. They, tend to leave residue on this. Otherwise, you don't get much residue on here. I was making some bridges out of rosewood, and that causes that. But, all this sandpaper runs a life cycle anyway, so you have to replace it every so often. And this is put on in a spiral, and it's just, it's got a sticky backing on the sandpaper, so I just cut it in and put it on here in a spiral. I made the whole machine, and I do have a video out there describing that, and I'll put a link in the description to that video, and so that you can see what I'm talking about here on making this machine. It's the most important machine in my shop, not just because I made it, but because it is so precise on getting things to the exact thickness. Here's a larger machine that does the same thing, but it's not nearly as precise, number one, and number two, you can't feel like as comfortable working on little tiny parts on that machine as you can on this one. So we're going to take this and run it through here. The way we do that is, the way we adjust it is this table goes up. It's on a screw, it's on 8 threads per inch, so one full turn is 1/8 of an inch. So just a little tiny tweak is like 1/1000th. It's really nice. And so I'm just getting it there where it starts to make good contact. And then I just tighten it down and I put my dust collection back on. Now the problem with something this thin is getting it to go through there. Maybe I should have just left it a little longer even, but 5 inches I think I can reach it and pull it through, but if not, we'll use a little push stick or something to get it through there. We're down to 40 thousandths, and I thought I'd pause here and talk about this. Through here, that's the widest diameter of this table, and so it's hard to lift it up, and when it comes through on the other side, it looks like this. Well, it's hard to get a hold of it. So I'm going to move over to the very narrow part, and then that way, when it gets through, it'll be sticking off the table, and I can pull it out a lot easier. So I'm moving over to this edge here, plus the sandpaper is even a little nicer over here. I wanted to pause the machine and let you see that we're down to 22 thousandths. So that's not much, let me tell you. That's about the thickness of the blade right now. So we want to go a couple thousandths below that, and it's still holding together, so I think we're going to be able to do it. So here we go. Well, there you go. I defy you to get to 18 thousandths on a commercially made machine. This really does save me hours and hours of time. It's a wonderful machine. I should go into production and make them, but I don't have time to deal with that nonsense. I believe you can see that on this caliper it's 18 thousandths also. And for my friends in millimeter land, that's 0.47 of a millimeter. So less than half of a millimeter. And so that's a thin piece of wood that we're working with there. And will it go down in the crack? Well, it should, because the other piece. And it's very tight, I gotta admit. And I didn't think about that. I mean, the blade itself was pretty tight, and I'm sure the blade is making the wood more or less expand out. So odds are I'm gonna have to take this down to around 16 thousandths. So I may have to go do that again. Although it is going in there. I'm getting it in there. I'll try to leave it like it is, because it'd be nice if we could get a tight fit like that. This is 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm getting all the little fine burrs off the edge that's going to go down in the crack. I'm also rotating it so that there's nothing sharp to stop it from going down in the crack. And I'm just trying to round off that little tiny edge to help give myself the best advantage of getting down in that crack as best I can. I'm also, this end is the end that's going to go basically feathered out to nothing, so I'm just going to more or less sharpen this end. Well, that looks pretty good. Now, can I get it in there, get glue in there, get it cut to the right length, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to mark it here for a length. Not much to cut in it at this point when you're dealing with something that's only about the thickness of about 2 or 3 sheets of notebook paper. Let's see what damage we can do here. Let's, you know, worst case scenario, we clean it out and start over. So I'll take my trusty Titebond original, lay it right over the crack, squeeze it like that, and it'll go down in that crack pretty well. It's kind of like using it like a syringe. The pressure of the bottle forces it down into the crack. Wow, that thickness of that glue is probably not going to let this go down in there very easily. That may have been a fail because I think the glue's too thick. I'll water it down. Yes, I know CA glue would have been a better choice, and it really would have been a better choice, except for the fact that it screws up your finish and your patina. We've got some wrinkled old finish here, so I'd rather not use the CA glue if I can avoid it. I'm going to wet this down, which may be a mistake, and I'm in hopes that it'll help thin it enough to make it slick enough to go down in there. I'm hoping. I can see the crack better now that I cleaned it off. I don't think I'm going to get it down in there. Dry, it went in there no problem, but with that glue in there, it's not wanting to go. I'm going to go ahead and clean the crack back out. I think the wood swelled up already from the dampness. This crack is kind of swelled shut as part of the problem. I'm going to have to back up and punt, so I'm going to go thinner on this and see what happens. I've got it down to 15 thousandths, and it goes in the crack pretty well now. It's not, I wouldn't say it goes in real easy, but it goes in fairly easy. And so it holds itself in the crack. So I'm going to try this canopy glue. It's much thinner glue, and I'm just going to put as little on there as I can get on there. Okay, I've got it in the crack there. Before it has a chance to swell much, I'm going to try to get this in there as fast as I can. There we go. I think we did it. Won't need a clamp because it's in there tight. Matter of fact, pushing down on this is pushing the top in. I can see it. That's how hard I'm pushing on that little thin piece of wood, believe it or not. I've cracked it above the joint there. Now, that's good. So I can clean up my mess. The canopy glue doesn't hurt the top either. It's a little bit thinner glue. Holds very good, so I'm sure the hold will be fine. Now all I have to do is cut off the excess, and I'm going to cut it a little bit, score it with this knife just a little bit above the top there. If I can push it down anymore, I will, but I don't think I can. We'll give that a few hours to set up and move on from there. Well, I mentioned on this repair that I don't like to use CA glue when I don't have to. This one here, I have to. I really do. I've been off camera monkeying with clamps and things and ways to get this crack to hold and close up, and I don't see any options. Even CA glue is probably not going to work well. My plan is to try to hold this with my hands and let the CA glue, hold it there, but even that there's just a chance. I'm putting the glove on because I'm afraid I'll glue my fingers to that while I'm trying to hold it. I've got the real fine tip on there so that I can get just a little bit of glue in this crack. I'm going to hold it up vertically. This gives you more control on the CA glue. Yeah, I don't even see any running out of the crack. It's really did a nice job there getting it just in the crack. I'm going to spritz it with this real quick and then hold it as fast as I can. Well, to be perfectly honest, it didn't do much. It's almost impossible. That crack is, this side is slightly proud of this side, and it's just not going down, and it's just impossible. And there's no way to clamp it really good. I mean, you could try rubber band clamps and things. I don't think they'd have near enough pressure in this particular case. This needs a lot of pressure. So I'm really just more or less filling the crack and trying to stabilize it. And yes, I could have filled it with wood as well, but then I'd had to dig it out a lot bigger, and this crack is really tight. A lot of people don't like to use the accelerator because it causes the glue to turn white. If you don't put the accelerator on immediately, it generally won't turn white. So and you can see there's no whiteness at all to that. I think that's glued and solid now, but there's not much way to really test it. It doesn't move much anyway because it's right on the edge here. Just checking to see if I see any other cracks. This almost looks like a crack, but I don't think it is actually. I think it's just a dark line or something. This will tell you if there's a crack. Definitely nothing open there. Yeah, now here's one that you can't really even see with your naked eye, but there is a definite crack right through here in the middle and up through the plastic there, and it actually looks huge through this. It's definitely a large crack. It's not large, you probably can't even see it on camera. It's right in the middle here, right up through that little V area. But on here with this, it looks really large. So I am going to get CA glue up in that. I really think that's all we need to do. We'll give this a little bit more time. We'll clean this up and stain this back. While we're waiting on that, I guess I'll go ahead and start a fret job. It's difficult to hold this instrument while you're working on it because it rocks around like this. I'm going to work on these frets, filing them off. I just found a piece of loose binding right there too that we'll fix. But I'm going to work on these frets, and I'm going to try to file on both ends more than in the middle, because right in here there's a very low spot. Yeah, the low spot really is about from here to about here. It's quite dished, really. It's from, the whole thing is dished right in the middle, and there's nothing that really can be done about that. It's other than just filing the frets on the ends. It's not really going to help it all that much anyway, because it's a pretty big underbow. I don't know exactly how much of an underbow we have there, but it's quite a bit. Let's see if we can measure it in some way. This only goes down to 10 thousandths, so this probably won't measure it very well. So it's about a 15 thousandths underbow in that little short distance. That's a lot. I mean, you know, on a whole guitar neck, 12 thousandths is all you would have. But I just knew by looking at it, it was way more than you need. On this, I'd almost want to see it perfectly flat, or just, golly, a couple thousandths underbow at the most. You don't need much at all on something like this. And 15 thousandths is a ton. I mean, it's a ton. Well, hopefully you can see that there's all kinds of filing dust here and all kinds of filing dust here and almost nothing in the middle. Even that's not going to really do much for this. It's still quite a bit. To be honest, I don't think there's much point in going too much further with it, because it's not going to improve it that much. I think that's about as good as I can do, and I think it's adequate. I think it's going to play okay. It could play better if that wasn't in there, but I think we can make it play okay this way. If this was a daily player and you were a professional and you really relied on the instrument, you could take this fretboard off, you know, playing the end of this down up here, you know, to get this whole thing in line. You could do a lot of things if you wanted to spend the money, but that would be very costly. You'd probably be into it for 6 or 8 hours at 80 bucks an hour. And so, you know, is it worth that? I wouldn't spend it if it were mine, unless I was a professional playing it daily on stage, that type of thing. Just for recreational playing, I think this will be fine. I think it's going to work out good. You know, it occurred to me that I really didn't explain what I meant when I called this a short neck, you know, and that there's so much underbow in such a short distance. The standard F5 style mandolins that I play and build, the body is connected to the neck at the 15th fret. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-ish, 9-ish, 10-ish frets. The F style would be back here somewhere. So, you know, so you've got that much shorter of a neck on this, and yet there's that much underbow. That's why it's just ridiculous amount of underbow on it. I've just sanded all the frets down smooth, polished them. They look pretty nice. To be honest, in this middle lower spot, there's a little tiny hint of fret wear there yet, but you know, to take it out just makes the problem even worse, so I'm going to leave it there. It's not enough to make a difference in playability. And now we'll go through and we'll clean up the fretboard. You can see the fingernail wear there. Now this is ebony, so you know it takes a lot more playing to put those finger grooves in there on ebony than it does on rosewood. So somebody definitely played this thing. There's no question about that. Okay, while I'm thinking of it, this binding is loose down here on the end, and we're going to get some CA glue in there. I think is probably the best way. And I'm going to just run the CA glue right along the edge of the binding here, and it'll wick its way down in there. And then I'll just hold it in there tight. It's really not cooperating very well. I'll make sure I got enough CA glue in there, put a little more on there. Okay, well now we'll put some oil on that fretboard. Well, as I often do, I've changed my mind. Instead of going to the oil, I want to oil the whole instrument. And instead of going to that, I decided I better fix this little piece of purfling that's missing here before I do the oiling, because that'll just look better, and plus I don't want to get oil down in the crack and all that. So I think I might have this fixed. This piece might just be even a hair too thick compared to the other piece. It's almost impossible to get in there and measure how wide those little tiny strips are. I'm just more or less doing it by eye. I've got this down to 32 thousandths. It appears to be a little bit too thick still by eye. So I think I'm just going to take it down another 3 or 4 thousandths and call that good enough. It does go in the slot though, and so I'm tempted to leave it, but I still think it's a little thicker, a little wider than the stuff that's in there, and that'll make you notice it. And I don't really want you to notice it. Taking it down to about 26 thousandths, that looks better to my eye. I've marked it here for the length. I'm going to cut it a little bit proud of my length. And I'm going to see if that's, and of course it is a little bit too long. And I'm going to cut it off slightly wedged so that as it goes down in there, it'll get tighter. Take a little bit off the end to make the wedge just a hair tighter. We're really splitting hairs at this moment, and I say that and not kidding at all. Really can't even hardly feel it now. Okay, you can probably still see it because it's whiter, but as soon as we touch that with a little bit of darkening dye there, I think it's going to make all the difference. There's a little tiny piece that's just lifted up just the least little bit right there on the end. It's cracked out about the same length as the other. I'm just going to put a little dash of CA glue on there, right in this spot, just to kind of stabilize it. And try to force that little piece back down in there, if it'll go. Looks like it's going. You know, the first can of this accelerator I bought from StewMac lasted me seemingly forever. This one's lasted about 4 or 5 uses. Seriously, I don't know why. It comes out in a massive spray compared to the other one. And it's terrible. It's really sad because it's very expensive, and I don't think I used it more than a half dozen times. That seems to fix that area, and I think this area is fixed now. I'm just going to see if I can wick a little bit of CA glue above this repair and a little bit below it, because it does look like it's opened up just a tiny amount there. I think we can call that good. I'm just giving it the last little bit of a stink eye here on the, just to make sure there's nothing else that I've missed. I think it looks fine. Otherwise, I don't. Once we color that, I don't think you'll be able to ever tell that's fixed. I just put the least little bit of dye on the end of the cloth there and rubbed it, and wow, it's pretty hard to tell it now. Okay, we're gonna clean this up now. This has only been sitting about an hour. But I think it's good enough that we can clean this up now and go ahead and oil the whole instrument. Maybe stain that just a tiny bit like we did this other thing. Let's see what this little scraper might do to it if I am very careful. Just using the round blade on the X-Acto knife there as my scraper. I like to get it a little bit better. I think part of the problem is going to be that this side's just a hair higher than this side. I mean, ever so slightly. Got this little 30 thousandths piece of shim stock. I'm going to put it in this sandpaper. and get a razor edge here and see if I can't sand this edge just a little bit. It is just a little bit off on the height, I have to admit. It's not perfect. Doggone it, I wish it was, but you know, you can't really tell that. You slide that down in there and there's no way to really compare the two until you get it down smooth, and you know, it just is what it is. It's not bad, it's just not perfect. Yeah, that's probably about as good as it's going to get. You gotta know when to quit, and I think I better quit about there. I took a damp cloth and wiped the whole instrument down a little bit, just very lightly damp. I don't think you could wring water out of that hardly. You know, I've used this semi-chrome polish on everything except metal. Let's see what it does to metal. We don't know until we try it. Put a little dot of it on there. I'll use this damp cloth. This is pretty tarnished. I'll just do the bottom half of it with this to see if you can see a difference. Oh well, I can see a huge difference in the shine. Can't really get it in a good light. It just reflects too bad, but maybe you can see that. It looks quite a bit better, so the semi-chrome polish did a nice job. It feels much better. This just feels nice and smooth, and this just feels almost like sandpaper up here. Now I know you can see how nice that looks. That's much, much, much nicer. I think I'll even use it a little bit on this here because there's so much just, I don't know, dullness, for lack of a better term, that you can see there. Let's see if we can clean up some of that dullness with this polish. I'm not going to take the tuning keys out of it. It's just too much work. I'm just going to work around them. Well, to be truthful, it's not a dramatic difference. I think it looks better because there's a bit of a sheen to the whole thing. If I did take the tuning keys out and really worked on it for a while, you could probably get most of that out. It would take quite a bit of work though, quite a bit of elbow grease. And it, you know, you'd probably be into it another 30 or 40 minutes. So it's going to cost you, you know, 40 to 60 bucks to do it. I don't think it's really a deal breaker, so I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think it looks good. It looks like it's been cared for again, rather than in perfect restoration condition. We're going to try to touch some dye on this, and then I believe we're ready to oil it and string this baby up. Of course, we do have to make a bridge for it. We don't have a bridge yet, so we'll show you what we do with that. I'm just going to get a little dye off residue off of the bottle there and touch it up. And we'll wash it back off here almost as much as we put on. Really looks pretty good. That's really kind of hard to tell where it was, but not too hard. You know, it doesn't look too bad. I don't know what would have caused these dark staining around here. I can only imagine it's somebody keeping their hand there, playing possibly. That's all I can think of, because it's probably DNA is really what it amounts to, but it doesn't seem to want to wash off. I tried washing it off earlier. I didn't try the semi-chrome polish on it. Maybe that'll take some of it off. Not really changing it all that much. So I think we'll just call that good enough. I think that looks fine. You know, from where we started, it's in very good shape, I think. I'm going to go through the whole instrument this way and just wipe it right back off dry. I do think this stuff is good for these old finishes, I really do, and so I do typically apply it to almost all of them whenever I have them in the shop. I just wipe it down very, you know, it's sparingly really. And then I want to dry it back off immediately almost. You don't want to let it dry on there, especially if it puddles up. It'll create a sticky mess. You put it on just as thin as you can get it really and wipe it right back off. It just looks so much nicer though when you're done. See how nice it looks? The whole instrument just looks nicer. While I'm giving that a little time to just kind of settle down there, and if you want to call it dry, it doesn't really dry much, although it will over time. It takes it a day or two to really dry good. What we'll do is we'll polish up this tailpiece now that we have it off the instrument as well. I knew there was a reason I took it off of there. There's a before shot, pretty dull looking. Let's see if we can make that look like it's in good shape. Oh yeah, there's no question that's a lot better. Hopefully you can see it. Just really looks a lot better. Okay, I think we're ready to put that back on. It sure does look a lot nicer. There's really very little difference in this, but hopefully you can tell which screw head I've cleaned up. This one has not been cleaned up here on the right. This one's been cleaned up. You can see it's shinier and the rust. And the way I'm cleaning it up is I'm just taking this wire brush and holding it between my fingers like that and rubbing it. And yeah, you gotta have pretty tough fingers. My fingers have been through more than this in my life. This doesn't bother me at all. This is like a manicure for me. Wire brush. Yeah, it's a little different world than some of you are used to. And as usual, you start them all before you tighten any of them. And that comes direct from my buddy Jeff Bradshaw. But it's a practice I've used my whole life as well. If you do much work where you're repairing things, you'll learn that very quickly. They seem to be fine. That bottom hole was probably the loosest, but it tightened up fine, so we're going to call that good. It just happens to be lunchtime. I'm going to let it sit and rest while I go eat lunch, and we'll come back and make a bridge and put strings on this thing. Friends, we interrupt this video to show you some more incredibly cool gifts that I received in the mail from Chuck. And his name is Charles K, I'll say, from Florida. And Charles has sent me quite a few care packages over the last year or so. And I would say this is the fourth one, maybe, something like that. And this one is just loaded with little goodies. Let's take a look and see what we got. And here's a little tiny saw. You could call that a keyhole saw if you wanted to. And that's kind of what I use it for. I made my own version, isn't it funny? He's a luthier. Apparently he was a luthier, and I guess he's out of the business now. And you can see this is the one he sent me, and this is the one I had made myself, and it's almost identical. I made mine out of an old hacksaw blade. His looks like a saber saw blade. Now that I see it, it says Bosch on it. What I use it for is the little round holes to cut the string grooves in on the tops of the guitars. I put the little string notch in there. I just can get in there and cut that out, and I would assume that perhaps that's what he used it for too. I don't know. I guess great minds think alike, but I sure do thank you for it. I think that one's a little better than the one that I have. Definitely the blade is really nice. So we'll put that to good use. The next thing he sent was another little saw. I am not quite as sure how this one was used by him. Again, it looks like he's got a saber saw blade crimped into it. Here's what it looks like. I'm sure it can be very handy. It's got the pull, cut, which is kind of nice. But I don't have one just like that, but we'll use it, I'm sure, at some time down the road. This appears to be a scraper. I've got several of these, but mine are nowhere near this nice in terms of the way they lock. This one here must be very valuable because it's made out of China. Of course, that's very brittle. I think they call these hemostats. They clip together and you can clamp onto things. I've got, again, being a luthier, I have the same kind of thing. I have several different versions. I don't have any this small, which is really nice. Well, I take it back. I do have a pair about the same size, roughly, but these are not very good ones. These are pretty cheap ones. These are really, matter of fact, these are kind of crummy. I don't even know where I got these. But so that's one pair. And then I have these better pair here. These are all real nice ones. Well, actually, here's another cheap pair, and it's about the same size. But it's kind of junky ones. I never use those two junky ones. So the one he sent is really high grade. And I have the big brother of it right here. So now I've got a matching pair there. And then I have this pair which has the bigger end on it, which is really nice. And then I have the smaller pair that's pointed. These are real nice too. I like these. So I will use them definitely down the road. Thank you again. He sent this is called a scale in terms of, for machinists, they refer to this as a scale, a pocket ruler, whatever you want to call it. It has decimal equivalents on one side. It's 30 seconds and 64ths on the other. This is supposed to, I think, function also like a depth gauge, but it's really tight. It's hard to move that. Matter of fact, you could cut yourself, I think, trying to move that. Now this one took me back for a second. I couldn't figure out what it was, but he had taped to it what he used it for and what it was made for. And it's a planer blade holder for sharpening. This had come apart. And matter of fact, this was all bent up here. I don't know. I found this in the box, and I found this in the box, and this flat thing in the box, all separate. So I'm assuming that they go together, first of all, because I didn't see anything else it would go to. And you tighten that down, and then you can use that to hold your planer blade while you're sharpening it, apparently. Now the only thing that's weird about that is the angle that it holds it. It's, if you notice, this is round or uniform round, but yet it's held at an angle in this thing, and I guess you can hold it off to the side and do that. I don't know. That might be helpful, especially the more I get arthritis. I've always just held them myself like this and done it, but hey, if you can get something that helps you out, why not? I don't really know what to do with this, but I kind of see something that might work. And I don't have any dowels here on that. But I could see this as, for small dowels, I could see this as whittling off the sides of a dowel. It's got a blade in there, a scraper, mica knife. Oh, maybe it's for scraping, the corners of something like this. Yeah, I can see that now. That's probably what it's made for. But I could see it also being used to pull a dowel through it, and like when I'm trying to fit a dowel into a place, I could see that being very handy. Well, we'll put it in the toolbox here, and it may pop out in a future video. You just never know. And this, I don't know how this is intended to be used. It's like a depth gauge. At least that's what I can see it being used as. These are lengths, and they have the lengths written on here. Each side is a little different length. Like this is a little bit longer than this side. This is 1 3/8. This is 1 7/16 over here. And I'm not exactexactly sure how I will use this down the road. This may go into my metal shop. I found this one really kind of funny. It's an old chisel, well used. What I find funny about this is I have its identical twin over here, just that maybe my identical twin is a little newer, or actually it's part of the same set, let's put it that way. See, it's made identical. It's got the same two grooves here. It's got the same red or orange or whatever that color is right here. It's got the same half round. It's got the same shank. This one has been well sharpened and filed off over the years. And mine's a little narrower this way, which is sometimes very handy. His is the wider version. It's pretty cool. It's identical to it. I mean, it really is. You can tell his has been hammered on and used a lot, and the end is rounded off and been chipped and that sort of thing. It's been used probably more than mine has, and mine has been used a lot. Anyway, there you go. I never saw one of these before, and now I've got 2 of them. It's pretty amazing. And then he sent me some tools that were made in Indiana. Look at this, Indiana. I'm kidding. Yeah, I can read. But look, they're block planes, little small finger block planes, thumb planes, I guess you'd call them. This one here, I think, is intended to be a scraper, because the blade is virtually straight up and down. This one is got the blade right on the end, so that'll make it handy for getting into tight places. And this one is, for the larger flat areas. Very nice. They're all real nice, brass and stout looking tools, and the hardwood in the middle there appears to be teak. If I was guessing, that's what I'd say it is, although no telling what wood they may have used there in India. But it's made very nice, very nice. So there's 3 of those, and then another tool from Indiana. This one is a depth gauge, and you can loosen this and slide it up and down, and you can tell how deep something is by using this. Very, very handy. It's got millimeters on one side, and I don't know who ever uses those though, so all my friends out there in millimeter land, yeah, it's got millimeters on this side, and it's got inches on the other side, and it's got angles on here. Can you turn this thing? I didn't know if you could. Oh, okay. I guess if you loosen it up enough, push it through. Okay, there you go. Yeah, you can turn it for angles too. Well, I'll be darned. So it's got a way to measure angles too. That's pretty cool. It's spring loaded, so you never know you needed this till you need it. Here's a combination scraper and pick. The reason I call it a combination scraper and pick, the edge is very sharp on this on both sides, and then it goes to a very fine point. So you could reach into something and pull out is what I can see this being used for. I can also see myself scraping maybe a little tiny corner or something, a real tight spot. This could be very handy. He sent some X-Acto blades. Now these were in the original Ace Hardware package, but I went ahead and took them out of the package because I will use these right off, because I go through a lot of these blades, 2 different sizes. Got the big handle one and the little handle one. I use the little one 99% of the time, but occasionally I do use the big one too. And we're down to the last few items. This is a real fine diamond hone. Looks to be very well used. It says super fine, so that may come in handy. And then he's got a little tiny razor saw here. This one's seen its best days, I think. It looks like it may still work, but it's well used. The blade is kind of cracked here, but I don't know if you can put a new blade in this. It doesn't look like it. It's riveted in, actually. But it may still be handy. I've got several little razor saws. I never had one shaped like this that comes to a point. That point could be very handy at times, I can tell you that. The sandpaper, I haven't gone through it to see all the different grits, but there are rolls, looks to be rolls of sandpaper. And it looks like there's quite a few different grits in there. Quite a bit of sandpaper, actually. And then, just for good measure, he threw in these little party clothespins. Actually, I have some small clothespins similar, but I think mine are about twice that big. These are really tiny. Really haven't found much use for these, but anyway, he threw them in the box, so there you go. So Charles, thank you very, very much for the wonderful gifts. I will put most of these things to real use. I guarantee you'll see them in future videos down the road. And I want to thank you for watching my videos, Charles. Good luck to you, man. Got a little piece of Paduke here that we're going to make this bridge out of. I think it's funny that if you look at the ends of this, it's been gnawed. You can see it's been chewed and chewed and chewed and chewed. We've got a severe rat problem here on the farm in different times and different places. This didn't actually happen in my shop. I think this was in a box of scrap wood sitting in a barn somewhere, and we were cleaning out different things, and I thought, well, that's Padauk, I'll throw that in the shop, you know. So anyway, it's still got plenty here to make a good bridge, and as a matter of fact, it's more than long enough. The only negative of using this Padauk is the color. It's this, I don't know, orange or red color, and we can put a little dye on that, but it's good sounding wood. It'll make the instrument sound about as good as it can sound. Okay, we're here at my homemade thickness sander again, and I've already got it set to about where I think it needs to start. The first side was rough sawed, so we're going to knock the roughness off of that first, and then we'll knock it down on the chewed side. Well, as you can see, we have it very nice and uniform. I just, you know, I'm just going on experience. I took it down to 235 thousandths on the width, which is less than 1/4 of an inch thick. The height right now is still fairly high. It's really right at a 1/2 inch high. It's 6 thousandths over a 1/2 inch, so 506 thousandths of an inch. Lengthwise, it's fairly long. It's longer than this will measure. This only goes up to 4 inches, but it's not much over 4 inches, about 4.5 inches. You know, I'm just looking at it now. I think I want to shape these ends. The ends are always curved down on these, and for the most part, I'm just going to cut that fairly straight on the bandsaw. Just pretty much a straight angle, and then I'll take it over in my sander and sand it out with a radius. Well, that looks pretty good to me. Now we need to thin the top down so that the top comes together. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to get rid of, say, 1/3 on this side, 1/3 on this side, and leave 1/3 in the middle. That's kind of the way I'm going to do it. So here we go. There's probably a dozen ways to cut this bevel on here, including even the bandsaw. But I am just going to do it by eye here at this wheel and the sanding disc. And the reason I'm choosing the disc over the belt is because I can look down on it and see that I'm keeping a straight line across here. You know, I still have to worry about the way it's coming out on the backside, but I think I can make that happen just by eye. So, and I'm just looking at it. I mean, I really don't have any marks on there or anything. We're just going to do it by feel. Here we go. Well, there you have it. It looks pretty good, really. It doesn't look too bad. Pretty uniform. You know, the color is a little weird, but like I said, the dye will take care of that. Very good sounding wood, so it's a perfect wood to make a bridge out of. Very light, very small, doesn't take up a lot of room. Now we'll go see how it fits to the mandolin. Well, just looking at it, I thought this top was made flat, but I do think there is a very slight bowl built into the top. I don't think it, you know, happened. I don't think it warped. It's different than a guitar that gets a bulge in it because, you know, your strings are pulling up on that to bulge it. There's nothing here to pull up on this. If anything, it should have sunk. So to me, the fact that it has a bulge in it means that it was built that way. And so it's rocking a little bit, so I'm going to take and undercut this through here just a little bit. It's not going to take very much. In this case, I think I can just use a regular scraper and maybe just knock out some of the middle here. All right, so let's see if that did anything. Yeah, that actually helped it a little bit, but it's going to need more. We're getting very close now. Matter of fact, it doesn't really rock now, but I don't think the ends are on there very well. So I'm just going to take a little sandpaper now. And It's the second time it's found that hole. It likes that hole really well. But anyway, I'm going to take a little sandpaper, lay on there. This is 220, and I'm just going to barely move it back and forth here, just enough to kind of seat the feet in there a little bit. Well, that looks pretty good. I don't see it's going to get much better than that. I'm just going by the scar where, you know, where it used to sit. Now, I have a feeling this thing's going to be way too tall. Fairly sure it is, in fact. I don't know though. I hate to cut it down much because I'm afraid it'll get too short fast. But if I'm just looking at it, it looks way too tall. It's not the best straight edge in the world, but it's close enough for my purposes. It looks to me like, if I was guessing, I'd want to cut off, half of this top bevel. So I'm going to go cut that off and re-bevel this, and I'll be right back. Well, there you go. We got the bridge made. Let's see how it looks here. I think I'm going to shorten it by, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch. I'm just going by the old scars and just trying to get it close to the old scars. So I'll recut this end and I'll be right back. Well, looky, Charlie, Chuck, I've already found a use for your little deal here. It's makes a perfect square for these small parts. Now that's absolutely perfect for that. So I was just looking for a square and I thought, well, heck, he just gave me one, you know? And so that's perfect. So now I'm mocking up here the angle I'm gonna cut this off at. It only took me a couple minutes to knock that down. I would say it's pretty close now. You know, it may just be me, but I actually like the color of that bridge on here. I think it looks kind of good. It's a little light. I'd like to see it a little darker. I think instead of staining it, I'm just going to use this linseed oil on here, and I'm pretty sure that'll darken it up quite a bit. Doesn't look too bad. We can always put a little stain over that linseed oil if I need to, but I think it actually looks kind of nice, the color that it's coming out to. But then again, what do I know about color? Hey, everybody's got to have a weakness, you know? And that's one of my biggest right there. That looks pretty good. It's darker. I don't think that looks bad on there. I kind of like the contrast of it. It's the only other option that might be better would just be to make it black to match up the fretboard and the peg head. And that's probably what I ought to do. But you know, I'm sure the customer owns a Sharpie and they can make it black if they want to. I don't think that'd be a problem at all. By the way, a Sharpie is certified as being a particular Luthier grade die, so you can use that if you need to. I'm using my trusty little piece of plastic here that I have the markings for my saddles that I use for my deer antler saddles, and I have centered this little new bridge up on this. I'm having trouble seeing the marks because of that color, but we'll cut those little grooves in there and give this thing a test fly. Well, that should work. We'll see how well that works. I want to use the lightest strings I've got in the shop, and right now those are these Martins. They're just Martin mandolin strings is the way they're referred to. M400 standard bronze 80/20. I prefer phosphor bronze, but you know, this is what I have in this gauge, and I feel like it needs a light gauge. And these are lights, they go from 10 to 34, so that's about as light as I've got. Perhaps you can see what I'm doing. I just wrap it around the post and go back around the post, run the string right through over the top of what I just did, and pull it up like that, and that will get her in there for you. Just making sure I've got the right side here because I carved the grooves a little bit bigger for the base side. I'm going to make sure I've got it turned the right way. Once again, you bring the string up, you come on the inside of your peg, go around your peg like so once, and then go back around it, and then go right through the hole above what you just wrapped. And that way you're wrapping down the post, and it saves tons of time. You don't have to use string winders because, you know, you're already basically tight. See, it's already pretty tight. Now these tuning keys, wow, I bet you we're going to end up working on them. Doggone. That's aggravating. They really feel tight. I was expecting them to work fine. Generally, they do work fine in these things. But these are not working fine, I can tell already. Yeah, and actually, they're really bad. So, back up and punt. We're going to take these off and work on these tuning keys. Well, obviously, hindsight, I should have checked these ahead of time. But, you know, you get in a hurry and you're doing these things for the camera and you're trying to save the customer time and etc. and so forth. No excuses, it just happens sometimes. They are bad, I can tell. I hope we can somehow make them work better because they are really, really sticky and hard to turn. And I'm not just sure what we'll do if they're not salvageable because I don't think these are easily replaceable. Boy, these don't look like they've been out of there in a very long time. They are very tight. The screws are pretty rusty down in the hole. With the screws being that rusty down in the hole, my guess is these tuners are pretty rusty. Yeah, you can see they were cut down and made to fit in there. I think they're from the factory. I don't think somebody did that. I think that's the way they came from the factory. That's what it looks like to me. I really hate to take them all the way out because there's screws in here, and I'm afraid if I pull them screws out, there's not a lot of meat left here, you know, between those screws and the top, and I don't want to ruin that connection. I'm going to see if we can just do something to improve them just by oiling them. I'm going to take a wire brush to all of them. A lot of people say that this makes tuners slip, and it does not. I guarantee you absolutely 100% you can oil them all day long and that will not make them slip. So feel free to oil your tuning keys. I'm also going to put a drop of oil on the shaft where it's going through this wood. It does look like they rub on the wood based on the marks I'm seeing on the tuning keys. So, you know, any kind of lubrication you can do to them. Well, that one already feels like 50 times better. That's definitely an improvement. I already know the action's still going to be really high. I guess I ought to go ahead and cut some more off the bottom of this, the feet here. It's difficult to say how much to cut off. I'm going to want it somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 thousandths right in here, and this is way higher than that. It's 110,000, or I'm sorry, 100 thousandths right there, and I would like to see it somewhere around 50 or 60 thousandths. So I'm going to cut at least 100 thousandths off of here, and that will drop it a lot. So I'll cut that off and I'll be right back. Well, I cut off the bottom and I reshaped the bottom a little bit too to fit that top again. And now when I come through here, I'm hitting it about, 75, 80 thousandths, somewhere in there. That's getting pretty close. I'm feeling like that's going to be high still Not crazy high, but it's high. So I guess I'll try to trim the least amount off of there I can. Just do it one more time. Took off quite a bit more. I say quite a bit, you know, in relative terms. Now we're hitting it about 60 there. 55 to 60. That ought to be good enough. I just hope that it will be good enough. So let's go ahead and finish stringing it up. I'll show you what that looks like when we get her strung up. Well, we got this thing up in pretty darn good shape in my opinion. I think it's probably in the best shape it's been in 20 or 30 years at least. I did check the intonation and did a little bit of tweaking off camera. See, it's got a totally different sound than, it's a lot, to me, more thin, tinny sound than the mandolins that we build. That's what it sounds like. They have a different sound altogether than what I'm used to playing. This one looks good. It's up in very good shape. It plays real easy now. The other thing that, you know, for me personally, that short neck drives me crazy because I like to get down a lot further here than you can. I mean, you can do it, but it's just not comfortable. But otherwise, it's in fine shape. I mean, actually, the underbow is, like I said, a little bit more than it needs, but I've got the action as low as you can possibly get it, I think, and you know, that helps that underbow there, so it doesn't feel real high or anything. We kept cutting the bridge down and cutting the bridge down till we got the action just right. In my opinion, it should last another 40 or 50 years without having to have anything done to it, as long as it's taken care of. Of course, they don't really have a case for this. Would be nice if it had a nice case, but these, the cases that come with these, or that used to come with them, were canvas, and you pulled them out from the back end. I haven't seen a hard case made for these. I'm sure there's been some around. Thanks for watching. Tell your friends. Please subscribe. We're getting very close to that 20,000 subscription where we're going to give away a free mandolin. And click that thumbs up and squash a big old troll for me. Thank you very much.